Hello, boys and girls. Bored now back with you. So, this is going to be my proper review of the original Black Christmas from 1974, one of the early slasher classics. So, some of you might be aware that I originally did a video for this film a while back, couple of weeks ago, I believe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, but sadly, it didn't all come out for some reason. It got cut off in the middle, so I thought I'd do a proper video now, redo the video essentially, and give you my thoughts and go into the film in a bit more detail. So you could sort of consider that the setup review, although I'll go into the setup briefly. But this is a Bob Clark film, as I said, from '74. It was all shot in Canada, very low budget film, very successful really for the budget. It cost well under $1 million, and it took 2 or 3 million, I think. So very successful example of an independent sort of film, and really it's that sort of very early slasher. Wait, I mean, there are some distinct kills, but it's very low budget, very low key. I don't. Well, there's a little bit of blood. You do see some blood, but it's sort of few and far between, and they really make the kills count. So it certainly predates the era where you got the more gory sort of slasher movies, and it sort of was a precursor to John Carpenter's Halloween, which then took the slasher and made it into what we know now. But very basic premise is, and it's all set in a sorority house. It's over the Christmas period, and quite early in the film, one of the girls goes missing. So slowly, kind of panic starts to creep in. Obviously, at first they don't know what's happened, so they're not thinking that anything major has happened, that she's in any danger or anything. But it turns out she's been killed. And the whole premise is then they've been getting these creepy phone calls from this guy in the lead up to this, and that slowly there is a killer afoot, let's say, and he starts picking them off slowly. And so it sort of slowly dawns on them then, it's something, because he hides the bodies essentially, so that's why they don't really suspect anything till quite late in the film. But obviously they start getting concerned when the original girl doesn't show up after a while. But that's the premise. So it's all set largely in the one location. There are a few other locations, but largely set around the house, and it's over the Christmas holidays as well. So that is basically the premise for Black Christmas, and some of you will know then there's a remake or a reboot, certainly a modern retelling of it on the way in the next couple of weeks. It's about December the 13th, something like that. So we're very close to it now, and it's going to be from Blumhouse, the sort of big major horror studio of today. So certainly if it's a reboot, I mean, from the little description I've heard, it does sound like they're going to try and update it and do something a bit different. So that is something I welcome. Whether it works out or not, we will have to wait and see, but I'm interested to see it, let's say. And then, of course, you have the 2006 remake, which was a straight remake, and that's something I will do a review on soon in the run-up to the new film. But yeah, that's the setup for the original '74 Black Christmas. Couple of familiar faces. You have Margot Kidder, who people most know as Lois Lane from the original Superman movies. She was also in, I think it was the original Amityville Horror. So she's in here as one of the sorority girls. And also John Saxon, who Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 3. He was in the third Beverly Hills Cop films. But basically, he was in Taliban. He was basically in a lot of horror movies from the 1980s. He's one of those actors you really associate from the 1980s. But very reliable character actor. Normally plays like authority figures or dads, but really, really good actor, John Saxon. So he's in here, so he gives it a bit of heft. A lot of the other cast, I think they're made up of like lesser known, like Canadian sort of character actors. One or two faces you might recognise from other things, but those are the two biggies in a way: John Saxon and Margot Kidder in there. So as I summed up on the last video, I absolutely love Black Christmas. Um, at the time it was a very original concept. The twist of it all being in the house, the phone call being from the house. He's sort of up in the attic. And it also does that thing a bit like Psycho does, where you kind of have moments of comedy and you have moments of character interaction that very early on in the film, before we really start getting into the horror stuff, and really that sort of breaks up the tension as well. That does a good job of giving you a breather in between the kills and what's going on. So the pacing, I thought, is really effective. I mean, if you compare it to Halloween, I don't think the characters are as good. They're a bit flatter, but they don't have the distinct sort of personalities, but that they're decent enough characters. I quite enjoyed some of their interactions. I do think they go a bit far with the Margot Kidder character at times, because she's kind of this outrageous, rebellious sort who's always really putting her foot in her mouth. But there's a very awkward scene actually because the father of the girl, the original one who goes missing, he's there, and he's obviously starting to get worried, and at this stage they don't have any reason to think anything bad's happened to her, so they're kind of trying to reassure him, nothing's bad sort of happened. And the Kidder character is just being really, really inappropriate, where she just go on this tirade where she makes it about her, and every time something happens in the house, it's all my fault. It works in the scene actually, because it's just this really awkward sort of scene, and her making an ass out of herself. Basically, she's had a lot to drink at this point. And one of the other sorority girls sort of puts her foot down, and says, you've had too much to drink. You're making a fool of yourself. Just go to bed. And that becomes a thing, because she finally does go off to bed, and she kind of just sleeps there. And it's actually quite well handled, because you forget about her then until the time where the killer comes around and it's her time to be killed, basically, which I'll get onto the kills in a moment. But I think they could have toned it down a little bit with the Kidder character. But there is some good comedy over the film. I think it sort of shows, actually, it's a weird career change for Clark, because about a decade later, he did the film Porky's, which is a very different, more a broad sort of kind of teenage sort of comedy that was in the early 80s. And I think, although he didn't actually do the script for Black Christmas, I think you can see with some of the characters, some of the humour in this, you can see a link to this and Porky's. But there are some funny little scenes. I mean, I quite like the scene quite late on where you've got two of the sorority girls, and and they're in the house together. And at this point, they've sort of they're aware then there is trouble and there's a threat out there. And so the whole town's on alert, because it's got to the media and the police have put them on alert. So this random sort of creepy looking nerdy guy comes around offering the girls, do you want protection? Do you want me to walk you somewhere? And it's just one of these awkward, I mean, it's really mean in a way, because they're sort of laughing in his face, trying to I mean, one of them particularly is laughing, and the other one is sort of fighting back the laughs in a way. She's trying to be a bit nicer, but they're kind of playing with him, and then they shut the door, and they both sort of crack up in hysterics. But that's quite a funny little scene, and then you get like this outrageous sort of drunk like sorority mother. Um, and she's doing all this stuff, like she's got like alcohol in like her sort of like statue, the statue of like a Christ-like statue. So she hides it away, and then we see her drinking in front of the mirror, and she's doing all these speeches to herself, and like kind of just bobbing about and stuff, and she's very funny actually. I think that actress does a really good job, but you do get these moments to sort of break the tension, but the tension sort of creaks up really nicely. It's effectively, the setting is really effective as well. I think again, most good horror does come from being low budget, so I think they just achieve a more eerie sort of feel to the surroundings and to the mood, and there's some really nice kills, as I'll talk about in a minute, but you do get a nice little crafted sort of whodunit style plot sort of thing, and they sort of stick in a red herring, which I'll talk about as well. So I think the cast is solid. I think the lead girl is good. I mean, at times she's a little bit too damsel-y, but I think the actress does a pretty solid job. I think she's, in a way, she's kind of the main girl that you're invested in, and I think she does a good job. I think, especially when the tension cranks up, you really feel that she is truly scared and worried and concerned, and obviously there's the sort of plot with her boyfriend. But I think that actress does a pretty good job. And I think one of the standout things about this film is the Christmas setting. It's that idea of, and that's why you do get some pretty effective horror movies set at Christmas, because it's that idea of taking something sweet and innocent and family like season, and just twisting it and having these horror sort of moments come in, because it then gives it that extra sort of sinister sort of layer sort of thing, and it's a very distinct setting, and they use that in probably the best kill of the thing. So I'll get into some of the kills, yeah. So you do, again, I think a bit like Halloween, they do sort of work around the kills because of they can't really get away with much blood. The budget is very low. So the first one, yeah, she literally just gets strangled. He jumps out from behind, and the house is a very, very distinct looking place. Not you get lots of back and forth. It's really used as a prop almost, with him lurking away in the shadows and sort of jumping out sort of thing. So that's a pretty good kill. I really like the kill with the sorority mother, which I think this is a good example of it blurring the lines between comedy, this farcical sort of comedy, and slowly creeping into the horror, but kind of mixing the two, where you get her. She has this cat that she keeps calling out to, and she's quite drunk at this point, I should point out as well. But she keeps calling out to him, and it sort of made me laugh, because she's calling out to him in this, and she's giving this whole monologue, like criticizing the cat almost. You're messing me about, you're playing with me, and I mean it's a cat at the end of the day, but it's this whole drunk monologue, and she slowly wanders up to the attic. And again, because she's drunk, she can't quite see properly. She sort of stumbles up the stairs, and she then sort of caught eyes on the other girl. So the original girl is up in the attic this whole time. She's like, he's wrapped her face in like cling film and like suffocated her, and so she's sitting up in this chair all the time. And then obviously the woman catches eyes on her and starts freaking out. And then it's a really nice shot actually, because she then, the focus is cut to like this sort of like sling razor, one of those things you have on a wire, and it's in his hand. And again, you don't get a good look at him, which is the point, you know. They're hiding his identity, his face. So not nice sort of build up to the killer as well. And then he just slings it forward, and it's too quick for her and cuts into her. And then I like the shot actually, we get a POV, not a POV shot, but a shot from behind, from like her body hanging out the attic, and we see her being dragged up and the thing closed. And I like shots like that. I just like that sort of the deadness of the body and then it being dragged up to his kind of hiding place, if you like. So that's a pretty fun kill. It's nicely shot. You get some good like discontinuity type editing. And I mean, speaking of that sort of thing, my favourite kill of the movie is, of course, the one with the Margot Kidder character. So as I said, she long has gone off to bed drunk. She's out of it, and I mean, the name of the character that's been phoning them all this time, he says he's Billy, so he sort of comes up, and we're never really sure if it is Billy or if it's just some other random sort of guy. I mean, he's been in the house, so I mean, he could have heard. Then they've been having these phone calls from a guy called Billy. But anyway, he slowly wanders over to the room where the Margot Kidder character is drunk and out of it. And I love, again, this is how great the low budget style works. It's very handheld, so it's that similar sort of thing to Michael Myers in the first Halloween, where the camera drifts along into spaces really, and you're not quite sure what's happening, but it's kind of from his point of view as well, so it tracks him slowly moving towards the room. So you get this sense more of him being a predator, him having this presence, him slowly moving towards his next victim. And what happens is downstairs, there's a knock on the door, and you get like carol singers. So the main girl of the film opens the door, and we get them singing Silent Night, and it cuts back and forth between the two scenes. So again, sort of inconsistent or in continuity editing, but again, that really sums up the film at its basic core. The fact that we have these sweet, innocent kids singing Silent Night, this beautiful rendition. And it cuts back and forth between that and the kidder character slowly being killed. And I like the fact that we see the other girl as she watches the carol singer, her expression just lighting up as they're singing this beautiful song. And yet upstairs we're getting the slow death of Margot Kidder. So like he wanders into the room, he latches on, he finds this like ornament with a blunt thing, and Margot Kidder slowly sort of comes around as he starts saying, it's Billy, or something like that. He said mention. And again, some great shots here, because you get the shot of her looking up at him, and slowly the fear comes over her. And it's also this idea then she looks up into the eyes of the killer. So it's this classic horror sort of shot where before you die you sort of see the eyes of the killer himself, sort of thing, but you're sort of helpless. And he slowly like starts strangling her and slowly starts stabbing, and it's brilliantly shot because it cuts away. You sort of, again, back and forth between the carol singers, so you do see the blade going in really quickly out. There's several movements, but it's coming back and forth between the carol singers. brilliant direction for this scene. It really stands out. And there's some distinct sounds as well, like of the sort of blade going in and her sort of gasping, and it's a really slow, satisfying, dramatic sort of kill, which again is given added sort of drama just because it's going back and forth between this more peaceful, innocent sort of scene. And I think there's some twisted comedy in this, because when we go back downstairs, the carol singing sort of ends with like the girl at the door just applauding and smiling, and it's almost like, yeah, she's applauding this thing downstairs, but it's almost like winking at the audience. It's like, yeah, that's the cap off, because we've just seen this gruesome death upstairs. So yeah, maybe she's applauding the gruesome death, or maybe we are. But yeah, it's a brilliant scene. It's brilliantly directed, and it sums up kind of what the movie is at its core. And I really like the John Saxon character, although he's sort of in and out of the film, but he's kind of the one guy who takes things really seriously, because the other like police officers at the precinct are kind of goofbags. So when they hear the original girl is missing, they just dismiss it as she's, whatever, had a fight with her boyfriend, she's off drinking. They don't really take it seriously, and then they start laughing when the girls tell them about this weirdo who's been making these obscene phone calls. So they don't take it seriously at all. So I do like then the Saxon character like jumps into life once he starts here, and he starts piecing it together. So we see then he's like the more experienced guy. He's got better sort of instincts, and he just knows to take every little thing seriously, even if it comes to nothing. He almost has that attitude, then you should try and follow things up. So he's a lot more sensitive to this and takes things more seriously. There is sort of a funny sort of scene where at the quite early on in the film, where the girls have first gone to the station to report the death, or sorry, the disappearance of the original cow. Like one of the officers asks like the kidder character for like the contact details of the house, and she just gives him what's obviously like just a fake sort of thing. She just makes up something quite comical and cartoonish, and he just goes along with it. He just writes it down, and I mean she's sort of saying it in a semi like straight way, but you can tell then it's meant to be a joke, and this gullible officer like writes it down anyway. So later on, when they come round to it, and the Saxon character says, "Oh, so what's like the I can't remember if it's the address or the phone number. I think it's the phone number, because I think it's that sort of thing where obviously they use letters in the States. I mean, this is meant to be the States, even though it's shot in Canada. And then he reads out what the kidder character said, and the other officers are laughing. And I think the Saxon one sorts of laugh, but he also gives him like this stone cold dead look, which is like, you idiot. so I do enjoy that stuff as well. But what they do is you get sort of a red herring where you get the boyfriend of the main girl. They sort of start slowly building him as a red herring, like there's issues in their relationship. He's got a temper problem. So early on in the film, we find out that she's pregnant. She goes to him with this news, and it's right before, because he plays the piano, it's right before he's got like this big sort of recital. So he gets upset with her, partly because she's already decided she's gonna give away the baby without discussing it with him. And I mean, I guess that's kind of progressive in a way because a lot of films at this point didn't really bring up the discussion of a girl having an abortion. You know, quite often it would be if they were pregnant, they would just keep the baby, sort of thing. I mean, maybe that's a sign of things being different in the 1970s in cinema. But certainly a more progressive way to look at it. But they sort of have a fight over that because he's kind of mad that she wouldn't like discuss it with him first, which you can sort of understand, but you can also get why she at her age would want to, give away the baby. It was a mistake. They didn't mean to. She didn't want to get pregnant. And to be honest, he is being like overly aggressive towards her in this scene. I think maybe that's one of the weaker points. I think they hammer home too hard the fact that they're trying to make him seem aggressive and sinister, and that maybe it's a bit too much on the nose. But it's sort of quite random because they start building this early in the film. And at the time, I wasn't too sure what they were doing, where they were going with it, because it didn't seem to have much to do with the actual like the plot. And it's weird because you see him at the recital, and the recital goes really badly. So it's this really awkward scene, and then later on we see him smashing up the piano, like he just goes like berserk, and it's like, well, okay, what does this have to do with the plot? But then you see later on, and they're obviously build that. And again, this is a bit heavy-handed, a bit on the nose. The fact that they're building him up as this potential psychopath, then he can't keep his anger in check, and there's issues. And the Saxon character starts putting this together. He hears about their sort of fight, and certain things. So he starts piecing this together. Well, could he potentially be the killer? Could he be the one after her? And I think it gets to a certain point where I think, and again, maybe this is just a thing of the time. I think when you see a plot like that now, I think you immediately say, well, he's just a red herring. It's not going to be him. Whereas maybe in the 70s they didn't use that so much, so maybe at the time you might be more likely to fall for it. I'm not too sure, but the actual way it plays out at the end of the film is very well happened, or very well executed. So basically she's really freaked at this point when he comes to confront her. And at this point, she's convinced herself that he is the killer. So she's like freaking out, backing away, get away from me, sort of thing. And again, it's all really well shot with him slowly moving in, and it does make him look aggressive. And so it's really frantic the way they build it up, because the Saxon character is like, get to the house, get to the house. So he's trying to get to the house as quickly as possible. So again, back and forth between the house and the police trying to get there. So they're convinced he's the killer. And again, really well shot. And we see finally she kills him out of self-defense. And again, because the red herring, when I watched it recently, didn't work, then I guess I kind of got then he's not the killer. But, at the time, if you're hooked into it, then you think, well, okay, she's just killed the killer. Out of self-defense, obviously, so nothing on her, but it's really effectively done anyway, the way they shoot it and what have you. And then you get the reveal later on, which again is beautifully shot, of him still being up in the sort of attic. So she's she's like all traumatized on the bed, and they're you get like a local sort of priest and to sort of watch over them, and the media at this point they're storming the house, and you get all this sort of stuff. So the John Saxon character is saying, she's been through an ordeal, just leave her alone. And slowly, because she's kind of left on her own, because there's a knock on the door or something. So she's left on her own for a scene, and then the camera drifts away from her room, so she's laying, like resting on the bed, so she's very vulnerable and innocent, and the camera slowly pans up towards the attic. We hear the breathing, so we hear the breathing without seeing like where it's coming from, who it's coming from. And we see him we get a shot of him still up in the attic. We get a shot of the ornament like with blood on it. So it's a really, really powerful reveal. It's really effective. It's that freaky thing of he's still in the house, he's still alive, the threat is still out there. A bit like again at the end of the original Halloween. So it's even though the red herring is a little on the nose, it is still effectively done, and the ending is just quite brilliant. So a great early slasher film, really, really effective. Some good kills, good tension and atmosphere, some decent enough characters. So I really like the original Black Christmas, and it really holds up as one of the sort of great early slashers. So as for ratings, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. I'm not quite willing to say it's a masterpiece. I'm not quite going to go to like the 9 or the 10 out of 10s. But it is a very good movie. It really holds up. The pacing is really nicely done. There are a few weaker moments, but not enough to really drag it down. It holds up very well. So 8 out of 10 is where I'm going to stand on it. And as I said, I will get to the 2006 remake before I watch the new film, the Blumhouse version, which is coming out in a couple of weeks' time, and I will have a review of that on this channel. But this has been Black Christmas, the original Black Christmas, and what better way to spend the Christmas holidays than to be freaked out of your life and enjoy the ghoulish Black Christmas from 1974. Thanks for watching. More reviews soon. Goodbye.